I'm gonna mute, yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome. It's the third Wednesday of the month. That means it's time for Kubernetes Office Hours. This is the live stream where we hop on YouTube, sit in a Slack channel, and try to answer as many questions as we can from our Kubernetes users. Thanks for joining us. So here's how it's gonna work. Actually, let's do introductions first, and then I'll explain how it will work. Let's go Ralph, Bob, Chris, Mario.
Hi, my name is Ralph Banks, and I'm currently a customer reliability engineer at VMware, formerly of Heptio, and specialize in on-prem and random troubleshooting of Kubernetes issues.
Skip me one sec.
Right. I'm Chris. I'm a Kubernetes admin with the City of Ottawa. I do most everything at Kubernetes. So if you have any questions, I have a bit of a generalist, anywhere from security policies to deployments. I'm also a CKA, so if you have any questions about that process, happy to field them.
And Mario, it's you, then Bob.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I am Mario Loria. I currently work at StockX in Detroit, Michigan. I kind of specialize in a little bit of everything Kubernetes, especially in the networking ingress area, as well as application workflows and Helm and CI/CD and some of those areas as well. So love storage and love some of the other aspects of Kubernetes as well. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I am a research cloud administrator for the University of Michigan. I deal mostly with lots of crazy things on-prem with various researcher needs, and also tend to get into other areas like federation.
All right, and I will be your host today. My name is George Castro, and I work at VMware as a community manager. Some regrets here. Val wanted to join, but a work emergency came up for her. And Rodrigo was going to join us, but he is sick, so let's send good thoughts their ways. Okay, so before we start, let's just give you some quick ground rules here. This is a judgment-free zone, so if you're hanging out in the channel, just remember that the Kubernetes Code of Conduct does apply, and we kind of want to make a safe zone for anyone to just ask whatever questions you have. We all had to start from somewhere, so let's all be supportive of that. While we will do our best to answer your questions, the panel doesn't have access to your cluster, so like live debugging is going to be off topic. So what we will try to do instead is kind of give you the next step that you need to do to hopefully help you resolve your problem. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences and pro tips. That's why you're here. And audience, you can help us out by pasting the URLs to official docs, or if people start recommending tools or things like that, feel free to just use the chat as like a live note-taking thing. What I do is at the end, I take both sessions, all the URLs that we discussed today, and whack them into the show notes. That enables to keep like a little set of topics. So if you see the stream and you're interested in something, you can always go back and reference that. Keep in mind that the Slack channel is being live streamed, so feel free to just post your opinions on there. We like to see what people think. Feel free to also post your questions on discuss.kubernetes.io. Bob's about to whack in the URL for that. We use that as kind of like the thread where we try to tie things together, and that's where all those URLs and stuff I was talking about and the notes will be published. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, and paying it forward. Each of these sessions is recorded and available on YouTube, so feel free to check out the playlist of all the sessions that we have. We've been doing this twice a month for almost 2 years now, so pretty awesome. This panel is a set of volunteers, so if you feel like you want to come on board and help share your experience or your expertise, we would love to have it. The commitment is 1 hour a month, and you don't even have to show up every month if you don't want to, as long as we have enough people to cover. So we try to have like a rotating band of crazy Kubernetes experts out there that can help rotate in and out. And if we do read your question aloud on the air, we will be using a totally scientific method of choosing a random winner from anyone who's asked questions today to get you a Kubernetes t-shirt as thanks for participating. With that, if you're in the Slack channel, we'd love to know how we sound. Please feel free to give us some feedback on the sound check. And with that, we are ready to go. Panel, how you feeling? We all ready? Audience? Hopefully they'll be start furiously typing here in a minute. All right, let's get started. So the first question comes from JM Reicha, I guess. Quick question. What's the best/easiest way to manually roll a daemon set, e.g. after updating a config map or some other config that doesn't automatically trigger a redeploy? And while you all are thinking about that, those in the channel, please feel free to let us know where you're from, as most of the panel today is from Michigan and what we call Southern Canada, and one from Ontario. So please let us know. We'd love to know where you're from and what you work on, actually.
Sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I guess, what are you trying to update with the daemon set? Because usually you just want to like increment it when you're updating an image or something like that, in which case it would trigger the deployment anyway. They are typing.
Yep, and while that's happening, just a reminder, those of you listening in on the live stream, if you look at the URL or the URL below, slack.cates.io, and join us in the #office-hours channel, just follow the little form there and you will hop into the Slack channel.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this. This is kind of something that gets asked about deployments a lot, and I've had it asked of other engineers here. How do I restart, right? Like that is not a thing in Kubernetes, right? And so really the core thing is editing something in the pod spec that exists for the deployment object or daemon set object generally. With Helm, I believe an annotation for the deployment object itself will work. There's actually a fancy command which I will try to find here and paste in chat that we use, just one-off command that can actually update like a last modified variable in the pod spec, and obviously just use the epoch time and causes a roll for all of the pods, right, for that object. So that's the best way. There's also a facility in Helm that can kill all pods all at once, which you usually don't want. So keep in mind, you want to maintain the like for a deployment, you want to maintain the kind of rollout model, the rolling update model for your stuff. You don't want to take your application down entirely to re-roll everything. So
you can also like if you just need to target like a specific node or two, you can just delete the pod off that node, and that will automatically trigger redeploy.
Okay, any other information here? If we ask your question and you need to do a follow-up, feel free to just post it right into the channel and we'll keep track. And sometimes if it takes us multiple times going back and forth to get to an answer, we will do that. All right, thanks for joining. Next up is Dylan. Thanks for showing up. He asks, if a secret is updated, what is the best way to refresh that secret as an environment variable in envar in pods? It has been suggested that I modify a trivial value in the deployment manifest and apply to trigger a rolling update. Is this the best way? If so, what's the best trivial deployment value to modify?
It's kind of the same thing as what I just said. You're modifying something in the spec that causes it to run a rolling update to apply that to all of the pods. So with config maps, I know that over time, I don't know what that time is, and this was a few versions ago of Kubernetes, but eventually the asset would be updated inside of the pod. So if you're mounting something in, I think secrets is the same, although I'm not sure on that. The big thing is the application most likely will have already read it at boot and will not be rereading the file system. So you usually like there's the whole like you can send a stick up or whatever the call is to the application. That's probably dirty and you probably don't want to do that. So yeah, doing a roll is the best thing. With Helm, if you're using Helm, you can make it a little bit easier and have the annotations in your template for your deployment, have the annotations do a SHA-256 sum of the actual config map or the secrets.yaml file. So on generation, it'll run a SHA. If it's a changed value, Helm will see that and then redeploy the deployment, which will roll the pods. So.
All right. Go ahead.
If you mount it, the secret as a volume and instead of as an environment variable, there are some things that will automatically reread it from IO notify. I forget what's called. There's something that will sort of act as PID1 within a container to check out that file and automatically reload it for you as a workaround.
Yeah, I know Prometheus actually has. I'm taking a look in the Prometheus operator right now, but I know that it has facilities to watch the config map like change live. and reload as it needs.
Yeah, I think it's like sidecar pod that they use for that.
Yeah, I think one of the secret managers, either CyberArk or Vault, might have a facility for managing those and reload them on the fly. I just can't remember if it's something like secretless or where exactly it is.
Okay. Any other opinions on this one? All right, thanks. The next one's from Dylan and is a Stack Overflow link, but as I click through, it's really long. Has one of you looked at this one and kind of giving us a TLDR, or I am going to paste it in the back in the channel.
Yeah, just looking at it now.
Yep. Does one of you want to take this and then we can get back to it because it seems rather long. And then the next one is a link to a super user question, which is really great. So I love when people put things in Stack Exchange because it lets them update them in real time and kind of gives us a chance to see them. So this next one says, I'd like to create a kubeadmin config file, multiple nodes, and this is a horizontal pod autoscaler one. But then he gets an error when doing a kubeadmin init, which is error unmarshalling configuration schema. Does someone want to take this one so we can get back to it? Kubeadmin, Ralph, is this you? How's your kubeadmin today?
I think it's pretty good. I got some nodes up so I can test.
Okay, good. All right, so you take this one, and then we'll get back to you on the super user one. Who's got the Stack Overflow one? Bob. Okay, we'll get back to both of you here in a minute. Next question comes from Dylan. Where can I find the original manifest for kubedns for EKS on 1.10? What generates the secret for this deployment? What I am risking by being lazy and not upgrading from what am I risking by being lazy and not upgrading from 1.10 on EKS, especially considering a future migration to GKE?
So, okay, so I've been using EKS for a few weeks at least, or maybe a month now. We're moving from stack point generated clusters to EKS generated using EKS ATL, the fantastic utility from Weaveworks. You're on 110. In terms of like getting manifests, I mean, for kubedns, yeah, I don't really know. Like, look at the key, spawn a 110 cluster kind of thing. ECTL makes this happen in 20 minutes. So spawn a cluster for the version you want to kind of see how things are deployed for that sort of DNS. Like, look at the config map for kubedns. Once you deploy that 110 cluster, you can kind of see how they configure things for that generation. I've actually done that for 114 as well, where I've needed to look at what like a future config map looks like for some reason. Maybe I want to update it, etc. What are you risking by not upgrading? I mean, I think that's pretty obvious in our world with Kubernetes. Obviously, lots of bug fixes, features, lots of new things, and eventually you're going to be very behind and not getting security and other important patches for that minor version, for the patch version. So
I'm going to call an audible real quick and change his question and say,
sure.
How can he find out whether the version of Kubernetes they're on is supported or not?
I don't know the go-to link / page for this.
Okay.
That's a great question. We should figure that out.
I feel like we should figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the TLDR to kind of answer his question quickly. But yeah, and then considering future migration to GKE, I mean, this is the whole, like, how soon are you going to actually be migrating, right? Or if you're telling yourself and your team, yeah, we're going to do that in the next few months, probably double that, depending on how busy you get and things like that. We always try to say, oh yeah, we'll do that, in the next week, and then 2 months later, right? Depending on importance. I'd say you probably want to get to 112 right now, honestly, since we're at 114. And then, that gives you a good 6 months plus where you can, get to GKE, and, then on GKE, obviously use the latest there, which I think is 112. So 112 is the latest on EKS as well as GKE.
Yep.
So,
and I've whacked the version policies into Slack there for you to peruse. So, minor releases every 3 months. Each minor release branch is maintained approximately 9 months. But we don't have a page that actually tells you, like, do we? That's like 1.10 is current stable, and
I
like
thought we
1.12.
did, but I've never actually. I don't remember seeing
So,
anything. If we did, it's in GitHub.
One thing you can do is if you go to the docs and they have the version in the upper right-hand corner, it's literally that -3.
Yeah, I know one of the big things with 110 that going up to 112 gets you is better verified Docker versions.
Okay. Yeah, in the docs, I see 114, 13, 12, 11, 10. So I'm okay if I'm on 14, 13, 12, 11, and 10, not so much. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. So -3 of that would be what? 111, 112. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay, just making sure. All right. Dylan, I hope that answers that question. Feel free to keep on asking in. Either Bob or Ralph, you ready to field either of those?
Yeah, this is going back to the Prometheus question, the first Stack Overflow one. Honestly, that is likely not an issue with Prometheus itself, or I'm pretty sure that's the Prometheus operator that they're using to deploy it. As like I'm not exactly sure what prom KS is, or is it prom EKS? But the response in that issue is actually pretty good, and that's trying to troubleshoot the, look at the events of the cluster itself and see why the cluster thinks it can't schedule it.
Okay. Anybody else look at that one, or was that just Bob?
As well as things like, get events, then start taking a look at some of the logs for the things.
Okay.
Yeah, I took a quick look, and there's some troubleshooting that still needs to be done there. So those event logs and what's actually doing the hold up.
Okay. And Ralph, any luck on the kubeadmin super user question?
I'm still working on it currently.
Awesome. Okay, we will come back to you. In the meantime, Anthony would like to ask, for using the EFS provisioner for AWS EFS volumes, is there a way to have one EFS provisioner for multiple EFS volumes? I'm looking towards Mario because I can physically see your eyeballs.
I don't. Here's the problem. So our engineering teams are so optimized that we only write microservices that need compute, and all the storage they don't need storage, right? So we don't actually delve in storage much. I can't answer that question. I really don't know. If you're using EKS though, keep in mind that you have support from Amazon. So if you've got a support contract or whatever you've got set up, they should be able to help answer questions for you like that if there isn't already documentation. So I apologize, I can't be more helpful, but the Kubernetes docs do a decent job of talking about some of the AWS integrations and whatnot, especially kind of relating to ingress and load balancers. But some other things are a little bit light. So feel free to ask AWS. They should have a good answer for you.
Anybody else have any experience with AWS EFS?
Not really at least in related to this question. I was going to say just hop over to SIG AWS and ask in there.
Mm-hmm. For those of you wondering what he's talking about, each Kubernetes special interest group, SIG, has a channel in Slack, so you can just go search for AWS in your little Slack quick switcher and hop in there, and they're usually pretty useful there to help you. All right, next question. Keep the questions coming. Dylan asks, how do I safely lock in a version of a Helm deployment, e.g. Redis HA, without copying the entire Helm Redis repo into our own? This feels like a common-ish question to me. People ask.
Well, so what does he mean by lock in? So if he wants to lock in a version, so there's two versions when you talk about a Helm chart. There's the Helm chart version, and then there's the version of the app that is represented by that version of Helm chart. And so each chart.yaml, which exists in the root directory of the chart, has both of those variables. If you're looking at like the stable charts, the main charts, which I presume he is.
Yep, and he mentions he wants to lock in both.
Yep. So on deployment, all he's going to do is call the version of the chart, and that locks in the version of the application. Right now, if he goes and upgrades, let's say upgrades 6 months later, obviously both of those may have changed, right? And so a new chart version will probably have a newer app version if there's been a release or two, right? So that's something to think about. But if you want like lock in the chart, lock in the actual version of that application, just using the chart version when you go to deploy is one way to do that. I know a lot of people use Helm file and tools like Reckoner, which is from ReactiveOps, which is like a whole like single YAML that defines multiple Helm charts that you want to deploy. It's great for bootstrapping a new cluster. In there, you can specify a version, and that version is the chart version, not the app version. So most client tools, I think, go to chart version, right? Because the chart version itself picks an app version to kind of to deploy. So, and obviously you can change that yourself, but again, then you're forking or you're bringing those files locally in some manner and running your own kind of Helm installation. So
right. So I want to expand on their question a little bit here. So let's say it's 6 months later. There's a new version of the Helm chart, and it might fix some bugs they care about, but they want to stick to the version of the service that they have. In this case, Redis HA. At that point, is it a forking decision or? Yeah,
as far as I know, I don't use Helm one-offs for installing things like that, so I don't think you can do a lot there. So you could. It depends on the application too. So a lot of times you can pass the image tag to use. So technically you could, right? So you could. So like if you're using Reckoner, let's say in that config, you can say I want to use chart X, and then you can pass a value to that chart when it launches, when it installs, that says, image.tag I want set to, this, newest image version for the application. So that would probably be the way that you do it. Again, it's dependent on the application generally and how that chart is set up. So
in general, I would actually either always fork or always make a copy of it, because it's very easy for things to change. And if I would not expect things to be stable upgrading off, essentially something out there on the internet.
Absolutely. I want to reiterate that, while it makes life a lot easier, and it is okay, maybe a little bit more so for core applications than it is for things that do need to be upgraded every so often and are very heavily managed, like Kafka or MySQL. Definitely be aware that just because there's a stable directory that the chart is in, doesn't mean that every time that you go to interact with it, you're going to get the best 100% experience. Right? I've deployed some charts, a few AWS kind of centric, auto scaling and load balancer stuff, that there's a variable that I didn't pass that, it doesn't start at all. Right. And that wasn't really defined in the README, nowhere really to be seen, etc. So definitely pulling things down. Also, you're relying on servers that are out there run by other people and their Helm servers. So that's something to be mindful of. I know if you're using EKS, a lot of the time Amazon will, for instance, source core DNS from its ECR, right? They kind of bring that on site so that you don't have to worry about external sites being DDoS and connection issues, etc. So I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, so it seems, the reason I'm bringing this up, it seems like I hear this question a lot, like, so what do you do at that point? Do you hard fork and just do that? Or like, are there methods for people that do this? Say, you know what, every 6 months I'm going to check upstream and like do cherry pick merges? Like what does this look like day to day for you? Is it just like
it's fork it
running a distro kernel of Linux?
Yeah, well it would be fork it and it'd be fork it, make it what you want, have a Kubernetes catalog repo in your namespace, and deploy from there. Don't ever touch it. And that's just a repo. You could also run a Helm server, right? That represents that repo, and your Helm client tools call that. And you'd maintain it that way. A lot of the time, what I used to do is just use the repo itself, and then just have some README documentation for other engineers or DevOps personnel that says, hey, just clone this repo and then Helm install / the directory with the chart. Right. And then, 6 months later, then you say, okay, do I need updates? Do I need to update the app? Do I need to update the chart itself? Right. Like those templates could have been edited so that there's a different volume out or different variables are passed and other things. And you have to be mindful of that. It's actually, and that's kind of the tedious part of Helm. right? Is those templates and how those can change. So you have to be kind of on top of that if you're gonna.
You'd have to have a change process there, right? Because if I'm in a different department and you change something and I'm depending on it,
Absolutely.
just because it's internal doesn't mean it's an internal dependency still, right?
Right.
I guess.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And the client tools do a pretty good job when you do interact with your cluster and you do like a Helm list and Helm history. You should be able to see everything about that chart. So.
Okay. Awesome, Dylan. I hope that that helps. Please feel free to keep following up questions. The next one is from Dax, and we are caught up on questions at this point. So please feel free to keep asking them in the channel. The question is, what is a good first step to contribute to Kubernetes? So we actually have a sister program that is Kubernetes Meet Our Contributors that is specifically based around that. And Bob is going to get you a link to that because I'm going to link something else, which I thought was really interesting. So Tim Hawking, one of the first contributors to Kubernetes, he writes in this post, I think it's pretty awesome because it's like a very succinct paragraph. I'm just going to read it off here. It says, I've given this advice many times. That's why I'm repeating it. So, hopefully he won't have to repeat this as often. He goes, start with a piece you find interesting. If you like CLI, start with kube control. Start at main, read it. If it doesn't make sense, play with it and add temporary printfs until you understand it. Then write better comments or rename variables or functions or refactor until the next person won't struggle. Proceed. If you can make it an hour without finding something to fix, I will be shocked. Before long, you'll be a foremost expert in it and start reviewing other people's code and tackling bigger bugs and features. None of this code is rocket science. Just start reading it. So I really like that because he kind of just talks about just grab something until you can like figure it out. So I thought that was really good. Now, the way we help implement Tim's idea here is we have a bunch of programs that we do run as a community to help people with that. So Meet Our Contributors is a start. It's similar to this, except the questions aren't about running Kubernetes, they're about contributing. So you can ask someone, what should my first pull request look like? We do
code-based tours.
Code-based tours, thank you very much, where like people will explain how the stuff is laid out, how you should configure your GitHub. People always have a hard time figuring out the CLA, so we go through all those things like that. So
there is a YouTube playlist with a lot of this stuff too.
Yes, which I will paste in the Meet Our Contributors program.
Yeah. In general too, if you're a bit more of like an experienced programmer, is sort of find an area or focus, like look at the SIGs, see how they are sort of broken up, find an area that, interests you. Like, are you interested in auto scaling? Are you interested in scheduling or, cluster lifecycle or something like that?
Yep.
And you can hop in there and you'll also see a bunch, like if you look on GitHub, there'll be a bunch of issues and things like that tagged with like help wanted, good first issue. And even if you're going beyond like the Kubernetes repo, a lot of these SIGs have sub-projects, and so the barrier to entry to help with the Kubernetes project is a lot less in there. And once you sort of find something that sort of piques your interest, you can then chime in like Slack on in the SIG channel, and most of the people in there will be pretty open to helping you guide you through that sort of first process.
Yeah, and the last bit I added, of course, is the Kubernetes contributor guide, which is a written version of everything we just said, except with a bunch of other stuff in there, so you can click through and look at like good first issue bugs. And all the programs that are available to you, but definitely look in there.
If you can also make it to like any of the KubeCons, there is a new contributor workshop where it's like a 6-hour session, 6 hours, where they'll sort of go you through the whole like how to start contributing to the project, and they'll go over other things like CI, how we use labels, how we use bots, and things like that.
Yeah. So that's good. Or you could start simple. You don't have to contribute to Kubernetes. I started doing this. This was like one of the first things I did, just organizing people. Ralph, looks like you had a comment.
Did. I wasn't able to get the kubeadmin YAML that was provided in the question to work.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
So I changed it a bit and answered the question on there because there's nothing worse than going back to a question and finding no response.
Yeah.
So I've actually taken to even answering myself when I figure out the answer in places like that.
There's a famous XKCD on there if someone wants to paste it in, where it's like, what did you see, Coder 87? Or whatever. It's like my favorite thing ever. Thanks for answering that. And then, of course, the link to that Stack Overflow question will be in the notes. Sean, thanks for dropping by. Asks, anyone using Cilium? Testing it out for BPF, but trying to get around the network policy stuff. I like to do default allow versus deny for testing until we get the policy testing aspect of it. Anyone know how to do that? Bob's already smiling. I know he's Cilium fan number one, so we'll give him dibs.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Cilium. We leave that policy open, and it should, like, if you're default allow, that honestly should be the default. I'd have to whip up and actually look at the policy language to write something out. I think they even have an example of that. So if you want to, like, pop over to the next question while I find the example quick.
Sure. And with that, we're actually caught up on questions. So let's give people a chance to furiously type into your console on Slack. And
there's the question from Dylan there on some pros and cons of EKS versus GKE.
Thank you. I missed that one.
That's fine. I did a quick answer. I'm just going to give a quick answer here. That is dependent on a lot of things. I don't work for Google or Amazon. I've been an outsider and kind of looked at both of them and worked in both of them. I personally prefer GKE. I think it is the premium offering. Google has been the leader in containers. They helped foster, Kubernetes, bring it here, and they've been doing them for over 10 years, and Borg and Omega, et cetera. In terms of staying up on security updates, enhancements, getting things like Istio and other integrations, making it easy to deploy clusters quickly, configuration, things like that. Google seems to be the leader in my eyes. EKS is a little behind. It's almost like EKS was kind of a, we need to be in the Kubernetes realm. Let's get a product out there. And so you can see that with some of the community, some of the client tools, et cetera. EKS CTL, like I mentioned before, is super powerful. It's not done by Amazon. It's done by Weaveworks. It really does help you. And if it didn't exist, EKS would be quite harder to use. I don't know in terms of like Terraform. I know GKE is supported in Terraform. I don't know in terms of EKS how well that's supported. The other big thing that I'm noticing from an administrative sysadmin DevOps perspective is that EKS gives you zero control over the masters. You don't even see, like when you do a kubectl get nodes, you don't even see the masters there. It's like this whole magic thing. There's some AWS. There's an AWS node deployment, and there's also the possibility of other core things being modified for that environment, off the bat. So, I think, at the end of the day, it's a proprietary kind of thing based on, the type of cloud that you're using. They're going to be optimized for that cloud. But it also, we made the decision to go with EKS because we just live in Amazon. And it does get us pretty far. It does get us a cluster in 15 minutes to spawn one. You kind of manage the nodes yourself, and that's great. But in terms of just the kind of the leader and what seems to be the premium offering, I would say definitely go to GKE if you can, and start playing with them. It costs you very little to get a simple 3-node cluster going, or in something tiny. Both of them are doing 112 right now. But if you can look at the EKS roadmap, actually, which I think is on GitHub. There's just a lot kind of that's lagging behind that's still being worked on. So definitely just do a day of research and playing around and get an idea of what things look like, and you'll get a better sense. But definitely you'll find things are more fleshed out, I think, with Google. So
anyone else have opinions on this? I have none. I'm friends with everyone.
+1 to GKE.
Chris, and I know Ralph is bare metal fan number one. All right, so it looks like Dylan is typing good. Let's take a little bit of time here, Mario, since you mentioned it. Let's talk about EKS Cuddle, because I've seen releases on this from the Weave folks. Can you kind of walk through what that looks like workflow wise?
Absolutely, yeah. So EKS Cuddle is basically like a Terraform command, but it's specific to EKS itself. It also interacts with EC2 to spawn your worker nodes. And so what it actually is doing, it kind of behind the scenes, is generating CloudFormation and then just applying that. for you. So if you go to like EKSCTL, like the README or the .io page, it's like a long page, and it's like, here's how, the things you can pass to the command, and that's great and all, but no one wants that, right? So you want to, write a file and put it in a repo, and you can do that. It supports config files, and it supports pretty much every option you can pass to it in a config file. But you have to go to their GoDoc API docs to see all of those options, and it's not very well documented. And there's some things that are broken. Dry run is not supported. You have to pass a SSH path, which it represents a key pair you might have in AWS, and there's other little intricacies that don't work as well. RBAC isn't really fleshed out for per user stuff, so you have to kind of generate a key config per user. And there's just some other things like that. But yeah, it's a client tool. It does everything for you. So you write up a config. I want a cluster. I want a node group with this size. You can do an auto scaling, which is great. It sets that up automatically for you. Sadly, we just found out actually the cluster auto scaler does not work with the auto scaling group it creates, right? So there's another little gotcha there, right? So it's like, well, I have this auto scaling group, but what actually can happen, especially, we're spreading nodes across availability zones, which everyone should be doing. For redundancy there. And in that case, Amazon autoscaling kind of does this rebalancing act, and cluster autoscaler actually negatively impacts how that works. So you can actually have nodes that just kind of go away. So there's little things, relatively bigger things that kind of you have to keep an eye on. But like, I think our configs are like 20, 30 lines, and they get us everything we need for our staging production clusters, and it's really kind of cool. So we have like a EKSCTL config. We have a config for Reckoner / Helm file, and then we'll have any other YAML files that we need to apply to the cluster, and we put those in a directory, and that directory represents a single cluster. And then I have 3 or 4 steps in a README to how do I set up a cluster, and it's EKSCTL create cluster. You pass the AWS credentials to use for, like, your sandbox AWS environment or whatever it is, and it goes. And there's waiting is supported for deletions. There's a -v to see debug info, especially you can see the CloudFormation debug info, etc. So it's extremely powerful, but it's a pretty small version, and there's still a lot more kind of in the stability realm to come. So
have you found yourself ever having to go back and manually edit like the CloudFormation stuff after it's generated it? Or
I don't touch the CloudFormation. It's
okay.
kind of one of those things that I think you could. I don't even know how I do that. Like, I don't want to,
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm wondering, like,
right. Yeah.
How well is it hiding this from me? Like,
yeah. So I've heard people, I read a Medium article from a guy yesterday that tried to make that like an autoscaling group for each zone so that cluster autoscaler would work. And he went and edited the CloudFormation. I think that's easy to do. I think you can just export the CloudFormation from HCTL. But I haven't tried it, and I don't want to get there in life. So
and Ralph is nodding furiously when you
yeah.
Yeah, you can edit it manually, but you can break a whole lot of things if you're not paying attention to what you're doing inside of CloudFormation. So it's a pretty sharp edge that you can find yourself cut on.
Right. Yeah. And HCTL is super powerful. So you can pass a sitter value for your VPC that you want. That's not like a /16. That's a /20, and it will automatically makes the subnets. And it makes each availability zone. It actually makes those a /22 or /23. And it handles all of those. It handles the route tables and everything. So at the end of its run, you have a completely working cluster with outside access, etc. VPC pairing or anything else you want to do is kind of up to you, but everything is set up and good to go to kind of do whatever you need to do, which is just super powerful. There's nothing from Amazon that does that, and this is why I kind of said GKE kind of just does that automatically, right, for both the nodes and the control plane, whereas EKS is just the control plane, and then you kind of work on the node, get the worker nodes set up yourself. So a little bit more overhead. CTL makes that a lot easier. So
cool. All right. Anything else before we move on to Dylan's next question? All right, we're running about 20 minutes. We got about 20 minutes left, so keep them coming. Dylan asks, what's a good process for staging to production workflow on a cluster level? For example, if I wanted to upgrade EKS and make sure everything works before switching from 1.10 to 1.12. I'm running ETL workers that are making a ton of external API requests. Would I just clone the cluster upgrade and somehow neuter the external request while I test everything else is functioning properly? Sorry, ran out of air there.
Yeah, that's for the most part, that's essentially it. You're generally going to have some sort of test cluster to handle a lot of the stuff, and you're going to have to mock or have some sort of external endpoints to validate all that stuff against.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's pretty much the agreed way to do it.
Yeah.
Clone, upgrade, test, destroy.
Also, in general, you're not going to be able to upgrade directly from like 1.10 to 1.12 or something like that. You're going to have to go to 1.11, then you're going to have to go to 1.12. Mm-hmm. Also, stuff to make sure is, you're switching over to use like the new like kind API versions. So like you don't want to use, I think it's extensions v1 beta 1 for apps that's getting deprecated in 1.16. Mm-hmm. So switch over to like apps v1 sooner rather than later.
Okay. Any other gotchas there?
You can also use external name as kind of a fake crutch to like send things to different places. So there's a functionality, it's kind of like a load balancer, but it's a DNS sort of a resolution external name bit, which I've used with some folks before to help that when they were trying to make sure they weren't hitting all of the actual production endpoints.
Yeah, external name is fantastic. I want to make a quick note here. Be aware about how your pods are querying for DNS. Be aware of ndots5, which is in the result file and I wish they would take it out. But basically, when you make an external name, you can name it awesome name, and then if you put that into, let's say, the environment variable for your pod, and it's just awesome name, that will be query. That will be it will search domain against cluster local service.cluster local. The namespace and services. So you want to make sure to use the fully qualified cluster domain for that external name. So it would be awesome name .namespace.svc.cluster.local if you can, so that you can avoid the extra 6 DNS queries that you're going to have there. So
that's just a general best practice.
Yeah, and it's it's a great thing. It helps make things easier, but it also can hurt you depending on the scale that you're handling. We've been bit by it a lot and tried to optimize core DNS and all of that. So just something to definitely think about.
Mm-hmm. And I found the external name stuff in the docs and pasted it in. Is that the right? Someone could double check that I found the right thing. That would be great.
You did.
Yay. All right. Anything else on external? Any other gotchas as far as the upgrades?
Just one pattern I've seen is some people use Arc or Valero just to do the backup, spin up a brand new cluster and just dump everything in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
it looks like some people are typing, so we'll give them a little bit of time there to field their questions. I do have a backlog one that I'd like to see addressed by the panel. Can anyone assist me or provide me guidelines to add a node with a GPU enabled in a kubeadmin cluster? Desperately looking for anyone's assistance. I have an NVIDIA GPU server and installed a single master cluster.
So it's actually, there isn't a lot of extra steps. It's really, you just need to make sure that you have the NVIDIA Docker installed ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Essentially, there's this fork of Docker that NVIDIA manages that takes care of a lot of the hassles involved in passing through GPUs for you.
Okay, so that brings up some questions. So first of all, so kubeadmin clearly doesn't just go NVIDIA GPU detected, enabling, right? So now you're asking me to switch out my Docker runtime, however.
That's pretty normal for when you're going to be dealing with like a lot of GPUs. It is pretty much the standard when it comes to like when you're dealing with like machine learning workloads and things like that.
Okay, so if I do this, I'm not turning my Kubernetes cluster into like A snowflake. I'm in the same pile as everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, good. Just want to make sure that that's clear.
Hey, George, really quick. Someone earlier asked about the daemon set rolling stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like updating a daemon set. Something I just saw in a GitHub Helm issue that I scrolled down in is that daemon sets, I think by default, their update strategy is manual. And so if you do want to have kind of the same rolling update thing, acting that a deployment does, one at a time, max unavailable, etc. You're going to want to update that or set that update strategy to rolling update. And I think that's done on purpose.
Rolling update, I think, is the default. With
for deployments, it is.
No, even for daemon sets, I believe it's
is it? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
With just one node down.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, hopefully it's not an issue, but maybe something to double check.
Okay. Any other comments on that one? Okay, Mo, welcome, asks, what are the main advantages of using kops to provision a cluster in AWS over using EKS? And what are the biggest pain points of using kops?
I hate this. I feel like I'm dominating.
Question.
Yeah.
I don't let everyone else go first, and then you could have the last word.
I don't even have to talk. Not a huge deal.
So kops these days is doing kubeadmin, right?
Not currently.
Okay, but it plans to? Remember reading about that? I'm not sure.
I know that they've updated their etcd a lot recently because they had been on V2 for a long time. Mm-hmm. So one of their things was getting etcd manager up.
Yeah.
So some of the nice things about having kops instead of EKS is actually having control plane access. So if you're running a workload that you need audit for a whole bunch of random reasons behind the scenes, business purposes, you're able to enable audit logging and all of the pod security policies and all of the other bits that you'd want. Mm-hmm. And then also the auto scaling groups are pretty easy to put into an HPA as an add-on through kops, like right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like if you're doing a K8s cluster on AWS, your options, but you want the control plane access, your options are literally kubeadmin by hand and kops, right?
Yeah, you can do kubespray.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Kubespray. This will kind of lean into our next question when people ask about Kubernetes distributions. But let's give kops another few minutes there. Bob or Chris, do you have any opinions on kops?
I've never used it, so I mean, any of the articles I read when I was initially looking at using K8s in AWS, kops came up a lot, so it seems to have a lot of support.
Yeah, honestly, most people I know recommend using kops over the managed service.
That probably ties in what Mario was alluding to before. And Mario, do you have any final thoughts on kops?
We had we had Reactive Ops actually kind of get the cop stuff up for us, so we didn't do a lot of it. But looking through the configs, there's just a lot to configure. It's a little bit tedious looking. Sure, you get more control, but with that comes more responsibility at the same time. So you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. I think overall, in terms of things you can do and kind of having that control, kops is going to win out over EKS. But if you just need a cluster going and you kind of can trust someone for a little bit, you're not running anything that's a special Snowflake or anything like that, you're probably going to be okay with EKS. I find we're not really missing a lot. Is there some stuff that would be nice to configure? Sure, but kops makes everything a little bit more explicit. So defining subnets and all of those things is just a little bit more tedious. So depends on your AWS Kung Fu as well and how much you want to configure. I can tell you right now, we have a lot more YAML for kops stuff that Reactive kind of set up for us than we do for EKS. So keep that in mind.
And that kind of rolls into a nice segue here. We're about 11 minutes out. Bob, do you know how to run the t-shirt raffle?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I just realized our raffle person isn't here. But Dylan's asked a lot of questions today. So no matter who wins, I also want to get Dylan a t-shirt. So I'm giving away 2 shirts today. But this other one will be as thank you for asking so many great questions. But I do want to segue into this question from users earlier. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, you skipped over someone.
Oh, I did. Where?
Jason Carter.
Oh, thank you. So Jason Carter 80 asks, running into that process now with ASG and clustered autoscaler. Is there a question here?
I don't think there's actually a question there. Is there?
Yeah. I see a link to a bug.
Oh.
Hey, it's just sharing information, yeah?
Yeah,
okay.
I think
Sorry,
so.
my bad.
Okay. But no, good call out, because I hate it when I miss things. So
yeah, that's what I was talking about before with the cluster autoscaler not working with the default ASG that
Okay.
TTL creates. So I think he was linking that. Yeah, there's a lot of documentation on that if you dig enough. So
sweet. So last question of the day, unless someone comes up with a really good one in the next few minutes. Is there any pros, cons, / list of all the Kubernetes distros out there? I see a lot of promising things in K8s, TEW, MicroK8s, Kind, and all the others, but either they are really bleeding edge or too minimalistic, recurring my current needs. Also, it seems like I had to discover a new proof of concept using a new distro every week or so, and I want to mirror this on the Kubernetes subreddit that people were asking what's up, what's the best distro I should use. But I don't want to turn it into a distro war here, but let's just talk about it for a little bit while we wrap up.
There was one that we did miss. It was a different one.
There is. Dax mentioned a PR. Thank you. Another question I had was about Kubernetes dynamic client versus the normal client. Why do two clients exist, and why would I want to use one versus another? The doc PR is pending for this here, and then a link. Looking at the PR.
It's a client go question.
Okay.
This might be better for me to our contributors. If I recall correctly, though, most people don't favor using the dynamic client. I'm trying to remember why. I know it was there for historical purposes. Give me a minute to think.
Yeah, no worries. With that, if the others, we want to help wrap it up, talking about the different distros you're using. Anyone prefer one or the other? I'm firmly in the kubeadmin single node camp for my bare metal, and then I use Kind for laptopy things because it's really great. But I don't think Kind is designed to be used outside of CI/CD, right?
Correct.
I'm just misusing it, and it's really good. And by really good, I mean really fast.
Yeah, so I just dropped a spreadsheet into the Slack. The guys over at KubeDex did a massive spreadsheet that kind of lists all the pro and cons of all the different distros out there. They even the price point. So they baseline it at what OpenShift costs, so you get an idea of what things do and how much they cost, and so you can assess what suits your needs best.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
What do you use? Just curious.
A mixture of things. So at home, I use depending on how lazy I am, either kubeadm or Kind. Here we use Rancher's RKE to spin up a lot of clusters, as well as through their GUI Rancher profile, and we may be using AKS at some point, or just using Terraform to roll.
Mario, what about you?
Minikube still, if I need something locally and quick. My go-to for the proper way is I'll spawn a GKE cluster, and then obviously EKS CTL. I haven't used Kind yet. I want to. And then for most things, like if I have a one node, like a dedicated server that I just want to spawn some things, I'll keep a repo with Docker Compose files for each sort of application and just roll with that. No Kubernetes there, and it's just very simple. Docker PS, and that's everything that's running on the node, using CoreOS or whatever. So I try to keep it as simple as possible, try to keep it as declarative as possible, and yeah.
Bob, how about you?
So we use Container Linux from CoreOS, and we'll probably migrate to Flatcar Linux when CoreOS is sort of finally abandoned and it's switched over to Fedora Atomic. Honestly, because Omaha is awesome and AB partitions are great.
I know, it's so good. But I'm hopeful. I'm looking forward to seeing what the next iteration of CoreOS will look like. But yeah, I do enjoy the OG CoreOS. Ralph, what about you?
I use Ubuntu 1804 with kubeadmin most of the time, just because it's so fast and easy to get that specific OS started.
Yep. And with that, do we have a winner of the t-shirt raffle? Sorry to put you on the spot, Bob.
Yep. It is our, let's see, first question, JM Reika? JMREICHA?
Yeah. I will. So you've won the t-shirt. Dylan, you've won the t-shirt. So I'll go ahead and PM you right after this and give you the code that you need. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We do this the third Wednesday of every month. And as always, this will all be posted on YouTube. We really appreciate you helping out. If this was useful for you, please help us spread the word, because the more people show up, the more expertise we can share with anyone. Any final words, panel?
Actually, follow up for Dex quick. Pop over and ask that question in Kubernetes dev, the dynamic client versus normal client. Probably get a good answer there.
You might have to be a little patient.
Yeah. All right. Is that it? Going once, going twice. Good luck, everyone. Still not sure whether we'll have one next month due to KubeCon. I'll have to see how close we're cutting it based on people's travels, but we'll keep everyone updated. You can just subscribe to the Kubernetes channel if you want, or this playlist, and you'll get a reminder. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today, and we will see the rest of you in Slack. Feel free to hang out in the channel and continue to share your expertise and stuff like that, and I will publish the notes first thing tomorrow. And with that, thanks everybody. Thanks panel for joining us. And we'll see everybody next month.
Good night and good luck.